Hey everyone, welcome to the Quantum Integration Summit with your host, myself, Adrienne Lopez. I'm so glad that you stopped by to take a listen to our next guest. I am excited to introduce Paul Levy, and I want to tell you a little bit about him before we get started with our interview. So he is a pioneer in the field of spiritual emergence. He is a wounded healer in private practice, assisting others who are also awakening in this dreamlike nature of reality. Among his books, most recently released, are The Quantum Revelation, or The Quantum Revelation, a radical synthesis of science and spirituality. He's also written two other books that are listed on our event page. You can check them out there. But I just wanted to let you know he's also the founder of the Awaken the Dream community here in Portland, Oregon, and he is an artist. He's deeply steeped in the work of Carl Jung and has been a Tibetan Buddhist practitioner for over 35 years. He is also a faculty member of the Shift Network. So welcome, Paul. Thank you so much for agreeing to be here today and participating.
Yeah, hi. I'm so happy to be here with you. Thank you.
Oh, you're sweet. Thank you. So I found you. I also live in Portland, and so I was interested to discover your work. The way I found you was your book entitled The Quantum Revelation. And so that's how I got interested in your work, and that's how I want to start off our interview. So I know that this topic is so big, you could write a whole book about it, and you did. But I'm wondering if you could just give us the main premise of your book today and how you see recent quantum theories actually provide a synthesis for spirituality and science.
Yeah, for sure. Well, okay, the basis of my book came out of an experience I had over 40 years ago where I actually, and it was based on being in incredible suffering and in real trauma. And I went so deeply into it in my own, just, assuming the position of the witness in my own mind, that I actually had this profound spiritual awakening. And it got me in deep trouble because I was in my early to mid 20s and I wasn't prepared for what I was realizing. What I was realizing was that this is a collective dream. And I was just having that experience. And I was so excited that it got me in deep trouble. I immediately got thrown in hospitals and told that I was crazy. And I knew it was made very clear to me that I wasn't crazy and was having an awakening. And that's what got me through it. But fast forward. Then, and that's a whole story that I won't go into now, but then once I became introduced to quantum theory, I began to realize, oh my God, this is actually describing and articulating the very experience that I was beginning to have. And so over 40, plus years, I was studying quantum physics, and I'm not a physicist or anything like that. But then I began to have such a deep understanding of how quantum physics was articulating and describing this world that I had found myself in, this dreamlike universe. And that's when I wrote my book. So the essence of the book, of what I'm really trying to say, and the answer to your question, is that quantum physics, it emerged into the world about a century ago and into the physicists' minds, not just in the world. And they were shocked to discover that the world that they had been exploring didn't exist, that the idea of an objective universe was a nonsensical idea that only had reality as an idea inside of their mind, but it didn't have a correlate in actual reality. And, because before quantum physics, the classical physicists were just thinking they were just passively observing and trying to understand an actual objective universe. Quantum physics comes along and says there is no such thing as an objective universe. More specifically, they were pointing at, and they had empirically discovered again and again, that the act of observing the universe actually influenced the universe observed. That's to say the act of observation is creative. We're not just passive witnesses of this world, we're actually co-creating it. And another way of saying that when you say the act of observation is creative, you're basically saying that, that's just like a dream. Just like, as we're observing the dream, we're influencing the dream that we're observing, because the dream is nothing other than our own mind. So quantum physics was actually discovering the dreamlike nature of reality. But physicists weren't trained. So you see, it's so profound, the realization. The physicists, and I'm trying to essentialize it, physicists
Thank you.
were not prepared to really discover, to really understand what they had discovered. When there's a discovery this radical, it typically takes centuries to integrate what they had realized. And so it's widely understood it's the greatest discovery ever in all of history. That's no question in science. What the controversy is, what does it mean? Now, I'm just coming along and saying, well, it means that we're having a dream, a collectively shared dream. And what that means is that consciousness is not separate from the physical world. Okay, and that's where quantum physics really interfaces with spirituality, that it actually is promoting itself to be a spiritual path when you understand what it's showing us. And it seems so complicated and esoteric, but it's actually really simple, because it's revealing the dreamlike nature of reality. And by doing that, one final thing, when you have that realization, it unlocks the most unimaginably vast creative power. That's our nature, that we all have. But to the extent we don't know we have it, that creativity, that creative spirit that is our nature gets turned against us. And the powers that be, or the state, or whoever, is more than happy to turn our own creative spirit against us in a way that's imprisoning us and killing us. And that's being evidenced all around us. So, the solution, quantum physics is offering us the solution to the myriad world crises. There's no question about that, because it's actually showing us our nature. It's showing us our creative potency and agency. And when a sufficient number of us realize that, we can connect with each other and we can change the dream we're having. And that's to actually consciously step into our own evolution. And that's what this is all about. But if we don't recognize what it's revealing to us, we're destined to continue to destroy ourselves. So that, in essence, is, what I'm trying to point out, and what the book is about.
Wow. Thank you for that. That was so well articulated and resonates with me so deeply. And I wanted to go deeper in a couple things that you said in regards to, number one, psychosis, and, the role of spiritual awakening, or that looks like psychosis, has had a role in traditional communities, or I should say wisdom practices throughout the ages. And so this psychosis is actually an awakening at some level for many people. I don't want to say all psychosis is that, but I guess it just depends on how you relate to it. Many people, myself included, have had experiences that could be labeled psychotic, as far as visions and seen, like being shown truths that go beyond what we know individually, when you spend time in self-reflection and through meditation, and that sort of thing. So it's just like, for example, when I first started meditating 22 years ago, I, started seeing things. I didn't share it with anyone, because I didn't have any words to describe it, nor did I want to alarm anyone. So I just witnessed it. But I really, from hearing you speak, it's like quantum physics has provided a way to validate, in a way, scientifically, what sages and saints and wisdom keepers have known throughout the ages.
Yeah, and that's we have to be careful about that. Quantum physics proves what a spiritual person is saying, yes. But it certainly serves as real evidence of what a lot of mystics and spiritual awakening sorts have said. And A thing I also wanted to mention, so I'd given a big talk actually right before the lockdown at a science and consciousness conference. And I was mentioning that quantum physics is sort of a modern day analog to, in Tibetan Buddhism, what's called a terma. And a terma,
Yes.
it translates as a hidden treasure.
Yeah.
And Tibetan Buddhism has really codified and really extrapolated this idea. Like I do practice to Tibetan Buddhism to a particular lineage, and this lineage keeps itself fresh and continually, sort of renews itself through the discovery of these terma, these hidden treasures. And the idea is when the tradition gets a little bit one-sided or off balance, all of a sudden there'll be a terma discovered that the community will literally dream up into. Sometimes the terma is a physical object, a blessed object or a teaching or a prayer, or sometimes somebody will discover, they might see a syllable in a book and it'll unlock 20 volumes of text in their mind that was waiting to be discovered. They're like alarm clocks that are, kind of planted in the multidimensional fabric of the cosmos that are designed to go off at exactly the moment that they're needed. And they're like symbols in a dream that when you get in resonance with the symbol, it'll like expand your consciousness. And I point out that quantum physics is very much a modern day analog to a terma. Like I'm certainly, I'm no authority on terma and I'm no authority on quantum physics, but everything I know about both, quantum physics, it fits the bill for being a modern day analog to this hidden treasure, because we as a species have gotten so one-sided and overly materialistic. And then along comes quantum physics, that when you actually take in what it's revealing to us, and you realize, oh my God, it's pointing at not only the dreamlike nature, and not only that there's no objective universe, but it's actually showing us who we are in all of this. And what I mean, when you discover there's no objective world out there, what happens to the subject? We as a subject need an object to be in relationship to in order to be a subject. When all of a sudden there's no object, what happens to us? So in other words, once we really imbibe the quantum gnosis fully and realize, oh my God, the fact that it's showing that there's nothing objective separate from consciousness, then who am I? I thought I was a subject. Now I'm realizing, but I'm not like a reference point in third dimensional space and time. I'm not a skin encapsulated ego. I'm not a separate self. Because a quantum universe, there are no separate parts interacting. It's a wholeness. It's a seamlessly interconnected, interdependent wholeness. And I'm part of that. And my consciousness is part of that. And so, you see, I'm trying to give a little flavor of what a game changer the revelations in quantum physics are,
I think you're doing a great job from here anyhow. But I just want to say, hence, that's the revelation, is discovering the truth about who each of us who we truly are, outside of all the trappings of our physical possessions and titles and, what have you, that we've used to define ourselves.
Yeah.
And so thank you for going into that, going into your Tibetan Buddhist background, because that's exactly where I was headed. So you probably already intuited that, and you already delivered that. So thank you. But I wanted to take a little turn here, as one of my first speakers shared, and I want to share it with you because I think it kind of mirrors what you just shared. He says, there's a soul of a new consciousness being born right now as an attractive energy that is calling a new way of being, or a new self into being. And when you talk about these termas, it's almost like consciousness gifting itself a new awakening to expand into a new evolution of who we've been up until this time, if we're going to use time as a reference point here. So do you have any thoughts on that, or anything further?
Yeah, for sure. So, quantum physics has, shown that each and every moment we're involved with our consciousness in recreating, our experience of the universe, you could say, and that, think about a quantum entity, an elementary particle, right? Because they were
Yeah.
trying to figure out what are the building blocks, what is the microstructure of the physical world, and what they found.
Quarks.
Well, they found even beyond that at a certain point, there was nothing. There was just
Yeah.
total emptiness, and they were left confronting their own consciousness. And the idea being that an elementary particle exists at each and every moment in a state of open-ended potentiality, like each and every possible state it could ever exist in, it exists. And then along comes the observer, and the observer observes that quantum entity, and the way they observe it, it has an influence on how it actualizes. So it will actualize in a particular way in that moment, and all the other possibilities vaporize as if they've never existed into parallel universes. And that experience happens moment by moment. So the fact is that, yeah, with what's playing out, when you see the dreamlike nature and we're all dreaming up what's happening, and there's a complete and utter collective psychosis that we're all participating in which we're destroying ourselves. Well, how is that gonna turn out? Are we going to destroy ourselves? Possibly. Or are we going to awaken via that experience? Possibly. Quantum physics says that's the nature. There's no determinate future. It's all in a state of open-ended potentiality, and it's a function. It depends on us. We are the dreamers,
Yes.
So it really depends on if a sufficient number of us awaken to what our nature is, what the nature of our situation is, or particularly then when we're able to connect with other people who are also awakening, having that realization, and it's just like when you're in a dream, when you're in a night dream, and say if you, as the dream ego, the identity you've been imagining yourself to be in the dream,
Yep.
you have lucidity. Okay, that's one thing. But
Yeah.
then there might be all these other characters in the dreams who don't realize they're dreaming, and they're just aspects of you. But
Yes.
what if, and just imagine this, if a sufficient number connect with each other, come together based on the realization of them having a dream. And what do they realize? They realize, oh my God, this universe we're in, this dream universe, is an expression of our dreaming. We are collaboratively dreaming it, and we've been entranced in thinking there are all these limitations and problems, and that becomes a self-generating feedback loop in which we entrance ourselves. You see, that's what quantum physics has discovered, that we have literally hypnotized ourselves into this small version, this limited version of ourselves, and there's no one else doing that to us. We are doing that to ourselves. So we've dreamed up quantum physics as a terma, hidden treasure, showing us, revealing to us that process, and getting back to that dream when enough people have that realization, connect with each other, and they realize, oh my God, this dream is manifesting the way it is because we've been dreaming it that way. Then you realize we can change the dream. That's who we are. That's in our power. That's what this is all about. And that's to fully participate, like I've been saying, to step into our own evolutionary process. And in essence, that's what the book is about. That's what my whole work is about.
Well, I just want to say I am awed by the perfection of this message in regards to, I on my own search for healing and understanding, I've gone to all the wisdom traditions, all the religions, all the practices, looking for the truth with a capital T, and coming to a place where I'm realizing, or I have realized in the last years or so, and it's not just me, it's like it's popping up in lots of places with people I talk with and connect with. And I don't mean to suggest it's happening everywhere, but if it happens one place in consciousness, it's happening everywhere in consciousness because it's quantum, right?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that quantum physics has really discovered or reaffirmed, is that this universe, instead of being a local universe, it's a non-local universe. And non-locality really means, it has to do with, it doesn't play by the traditional rules of third dimensional space and time. So in other words, if we have a realization right now in this moment, that realization, in a sense, gets deposited all throughout space and all throughout time, both backwards in time, forward in the future, and through every, ounce of space in the universe. And that's really interesting because it's an expression, like I was saying, that quantum physics is showing us that, a quantum system, and this is a quantum system on all scales through and through this universe, is that there's no separate parts interacting. You see, so it's really about seeing through the imagination, the false imagination, A, that this universe exists in a way that it doesn't, and B, that we seeing through our imagination that we exist in a way that we don't. We are not separate beings. I only exist in relationship to you.
Yeah.
But yet you don't exist independently on your own as a separate self, but you only exist in relationship to the whole rest of the universe. So we're all interrelated and interdependent, and there's no like objective separate self that exists from its own side anywhere to be found. When you realize that, that is the expansion of consciousness. And when you have the expansion of consciousness of seeing what, the nature of our situation and your own nature, it's not just an intellectual understanding. It opens your heart, because the actual energetic expression of the dreamlike nature, of the quantum nature, is compassion, is an open heart. And that gets registered non-locally throughout the universe. And that makes it that much easier for everybody else to step into it. And, and that's who we are. We're, in a way, these bodhisattva is a phrase in Buddhism, and it translates as a being in the process of awakening. And who among us is not that? And the idea is when we see who we are, step out of the separate self, and we recognize, oh wow, who we are as part of the whole. We're not separate. We're all dream characters in each other's dreams. And what we're here to do is to be in service to the whole. Instead of being in service to self, is to be in service to others. And as more and more of us do that, it generates a non-local field and an energy, like I'm saying, that makes it easier for all of us to do that. And that's the potential awakening, but it's not written in stone. It all depends on us, Yeah,
definitely. Well, I personally have felt called to spread this information and this whole idea of thinking. I know when you explain all of these concepts in regards to, we're all connected, and we've, been in these this hypnotic trance. And, I think some time ago I came upon this book called The Trances We Live In, and it was written by a Buddhist. Do you know it?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And it was a really good book.
Can I explain a little bit about the trance, because it's so important?
Yeah.
Like a really great way of understanding. So we are under a spell. Okay. And I can prove that. Here's a way of understanding it. So just to invoke the creative imagination, and imagine you're in a dream, right? Yes. Now, what is a dream? But it's an actual reflection of the mind. It's a projection of the mind. So whatever viewpoint you're holding is instantaneously reflected back by the dream, because the dream is nothing other than your own mind.
Yeah.
And so if you're holding a particular point of view in that dream, just remember the dream is nothing other than your own mind reflected back to yourself. The dream will then, in no time whatsoever, reflect back that state of mind, that attitude, that perspective that you're holding, giving you all the evidence you need, confirming, oh, that point of view is objective. And so then you become even more fixed in your point of view that what I'm seeing is objective. So you become even more fixated in that point of view. And the more fixated you become, the more the dream just gives you evidence confirming, seemingly proving the objective truth of your viewpoint. That's a self-generating feedback loop. Yes. Whose origin is to be found within your very mind, and you've actually entranced yourself by your own creative genius. You see, so that in the quantum physics book, I talk about that we are these geniuses with amnesia. We're like, we have sort of what is it called? Like sort of spiritual Alzheimer's in a way. We've forgotten, we've tricked ourselves out of our right mind, and we've forgotten our own creative genius. We're like these,
Lost in our own
apprentices.
creation. Yeah.
Yeah, we're like these, what is it called? Like, yeah, we're like sorcerers' apprentices who are using our own magic in a way that's killing us. We have this unbelievably vast, I mean, in the the founding fathers of quantum physics, they were using phrases like the 13th, what is it, godmother, or an evil witch, or a black magic spell. These were the words that these hardcore, rigorous physicists
Yeah.
were using to describe what they had discovered, because they were tapping into how we had hypnotized and entranced ourselves by our own creative genius. So, and that's why I say this is the solution to all the myriad world crises, when sufficient numbers of us actually tap into this realization, embody it, implement it in our lives, connect with other people who are also realizing it, and then we can get in phase with each other, in a way that we can change the dream. And that's not new age woo-woo.
No.
That's the reality.
Yes, it is. And so I know that I get very excited about these conversations, and you're very passionate as well. But I know that there's a lot of people that get very triggered and frightened by these conversations, because that's part of their dream, right? It hasn't actually allowed for any other possibility outside of it. But at the same time, when you read the definitions of true liberation in various wisdom traditions, it is the recognition of self. And when that recognition happens, then, as you said, like a whole floodgate of like compassion and connection that can never be lost is found, and it's recognized as our essence.
Yeah. And that's in essence, I mean, so here we are, we're in a position where we don't recognize who we are. We don't recognize the nature of reality.
Mm-hmm.
We don't recognize our relationship to that reality. And then we try to, so that creates real problems in our minds and in the world. And then we try to solve the problem by trying to, like, thinking the problem and the source of the problem is out there and external.
Yeah.
And it's madness, you see. So, I've just written a book about, this mind virus, and, I've already written another book about it.
What's the name of it?
The actual book that came out 6 months ago, it's called Watiko.
Okay.
Healing, what is it? It's healing.
She's like, what did I write anyway?
Yeah, no. What's it? I'm trying to remember, because I
said
have
healing the mind virus that plagues our world.
Right.
Yes.
That's the subtitle of the second book.
Yeah.
I have another book on Watiko, the third book. It's a trilogy coming out in the spring. But the idea is that there's a mind virus, and that's at the bottom of the collective psychosis and of all the evil that's playing out. And I'm not just saying this. Every wisdom tradition throughout history
has said this in their own way.
Saying this. It's in the apocryphal text of the Bible. Yeah. They call it the counterfeiting spirit. It impersonates us. It puts us on. And if we're not awake, it presents us with a limited version of who we are. Oh, I'm wounded. I'm traumatized. And then if we're not awake, we identify with its limited version of ourselves. Yeah. And then it has us. Then it can manipulate and control us. But if we actually, are in touch with our nature, it has no power over us at all. And so if you think about what I just described, so on the one hand, with this mind virus, you see, it can't steal our soul, but it tricks us into giving our soul away. Yes. And then we disconnect from our creative agency, and it's total madness. The fact is, we as a species, we're having a collective psychosis, and encoded in the madness is a revelation. That's another thing I'm pointing out in my work. And just like encoded in quantum physics is a revelation, encoded in the pathology. You see, this mind virus is quantum in nature. Yes. And what I mean when I say quantum, just like light is both a wave or a particle, there's a superposition of states depending on how it's observed. If you observe it this way, it's a wave. Observe it that way, it's a particle. The same thing with Watiko mind virus. And that's an indigenous term, Watiko.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, it's a Native American term. But it's in every tradition. They talk about it. One of my books, I talk about like every tradition throughout history is pointing at Watiko, just in different words. But the idea is that if you don't recognize that it's a revelation, it will kill you and it will destroy our species. But if enough people recognize that this mind virus is actually revealing to us our nature, and it's revealing to us our unconscious creative power, then it's actually helping us to wake up. So this mind virus is either killing us or waking us up. It's quantum in nature. It depends if we recognize what it's showing us. That's the point.
Okay, two things before we go. I just love hearing you talk and what you have to say, so thank you. Now, do you think it's a stretch to say that this mind virus that you talk about is actually being supported by the life energy, our creative life energy, and that when we remove...
This mind virus itself has no creative energy at all, but it's a master impersonator. So what it does, it plugs into our creativity and it turns our own creativity against us. That's why the medicine for the mind virus, and I can't say, and this is what quantum physics is showing, medicine for the mind virus is being creative. Okay, we are creative beings, you know, and people who think, oh, I'm just going to wait for the second coming, and I don't, you know, no, they're actually unwittingly, we are the second coming. They are unwittingly feeding the mind virus. But people who are actually actively involved in the creative process, they are, by doing that, they are literally becoming instruments for the second coming. So I can't say enough the profound importance of each and every one of us connecting with the creative spirit, because that is our nature. Because here's the way it works. When you realize who you are, you recognize, oh, the self is creative. And the more you realize yourself, the more creative you get. And the more creative you get, the more you realize itself. It's a positive feedback loop that literally creates light upon light. Okay.
I love it.
So I just can't say enough about how important it is to be creative.
I received that message. I've been speaking with, you know, all my different speakers, and the conversation of creativity has come up. But from an ego mind perspective, there's all these conversations about, you know, there's certain people that are creative, or only artists are creative, or only, you know, dancers or musicians are creative. And so we were talking about that, this whole limited view of like, that's all we get to be, when in fact, every single moment of the day, we are creating our experience. And
exactly. Right. By the way, we interpret it and place meaning on it, you know, exactly.
Yes. And that is the creative power you're speaking of that will actually be doing the awakening. Yeah. Because we're using and utilizing, or taking or owning the fullness of our power through creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And if, like an example, if somebody came into my office and their dream, they had a dream last night, right? And say the dream was what's happening in the world, that, oh, there's this, you know, coronavirus, and there's a lockdown, and they're taking away our liberties, and they're wanting to mandate this, or like centralized power and control. And say this was an individual person's dream. And they would say, well, how do you interpret that dream? And I would say to them, well, clearly you're not in touch with your power, because you're outsourcing your power. So all the external, like, you know, powers that be are more than happy to take your power and to turn it against you. So what that dream would be showing me is that the dreamer, you know, which in this case is us, that we are not, you know, consciously accessing our creative agency.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. All right. Before I let you go today, I have one other question for you. About your work that you do in the community Awaken the Dream, or Awaken in the Dream. And I was curious, as you do this work with people, and it already sounds like you've already halfway answered this, but that when you're working with people in their dream work, which is their life, right? Do you notice that there's holistic patterns that you observe? Like, for example, Jung talked about the hero's journey, but certain patterns or phases that begin to happen in individuals' journeys as they awaken.
No, for sure, totally. And because, you know, I mean, on the one hand, whatever a person's process is, it's their own personal process, but always it's some sort of reflection of an archetypal process that they just are, as an individual person, are the instantiation of, or like, you know, embodying. And one of the processes that I noticed that feels really important to mention, because I see this like an example. You know, I had, my whole process was, how I came to these realizations was not easy, in that, you know, there was deep suffering, and, you know, without going into the story, It was intense. Like, my father was just a really sick person, and I was the sensitive only child who was tracking it, but I got really wounded and traumatized. And then through that trauma, I had an awakening. And, and then when I got out of the last hospital in 82, and my whole universe was like, Paul, you're mentally ill and in denial of your illness. And I knew I was having an awakening. So I just thought they were completely stupid. But the point is that, so then I found my teachers, these great Tibetan lamas, and I would go to them all the time, every few days for years. And I would be telling them the pain and the trauma and the demons. And one day they looked at me and they said to me, and they said, Paul, the fact that what's going on for you is that you have such an incredible potential for light. That's why the demons are even interested. If you didn't have such a potential for light, the demons wouldn't be interested. And then that's true for all of us. And just to like connect that to something. So I've learned that whenever, I'm a creative person, I create every day, write my books or whatever. And I always, when I first sit down to write, I feel this resistance. And I've learned the greater the resistance, the greater the potential breakthrough. And so the fact that there are like these dark forces trying to stop me, in my mind and sometimes in the world, I take that as a great sign, going, fantastic, I'm on the right path, instead of like, wow, I'm really screwed up. So
I love
the point
it.
is that for all of us as creative people to understand that when you're getting close to your light, to your nature, to yourself, there are going to be obscuring forces. That's how that's part of the equation. But then how do you interpret that? Do you like go belly up and let them stop you? Or do you recognize, oh, of course there are darker forces. Why would there not be? I'm actually getting really close to my light. And then it even inspires you even more to keep on going.
I love it. I love that. That is so helpful because so many creative people, so many sensitive people, so many empaths are really, suffering so much as they, try to step onto their path, and a lot of them are just processing huge shadows, and they get so bogged down by that negative
Yeah.
energy.
And can I say something about what
Yeah.
you just said? Because
Mhm.
one of the big mistakes I see people make, so we're all, as individuals, we're all interconnected and interdependent with each other, with the entire universe, with the non-local
Yeah.
field,
Yeah.
on all dimensions. And there's a tendency, an unconscious tendency, if I'm feeling some sort of darker energy, to personalize it and think, oh, wow, this is just mine. And on one level, you have to own it and take responsibility. Yeah, on one level, it is personal up
Yeah.
to a degree. But as organs think about us as like organs of the greater body politic of our
Yeah.
species. Who's to say that you feeling that negative energy, you might not be shamanically like picking up a negative energy that's in the non-local field, and you feeling it, you as an organ, that's you might be metabolizing the darker energy that's in like the collective unconscious of our species at that moment. And by seeing your process in that way, it snaps you out of the separate self, and it gives
Yeah.
you more of the recognition. Oh yeah, we're all interconnected, interdependent. Wow, I've just snapped out of seeing through the lens of the separate self. Oh wow, now I recognize the shamanic part of me. Wow, we're all shamans in training. That's who we are. The universe is going through a shamanic death rebirth experience. It helps to recontextualize every aspect of your experience.
I love it. I love it. I intuitively, nobody told me this, I just intuitively was aware of this. And a lot of these things that I am aware of, I've never shared because just because the sometimes the reaction of some people who cannot metabolize or receive the messages. So at least that's been my story in the past, or something that I've been waking up from myself. But with that being said, I just want to take a moment as we're rounding around the corner of this fabulous interview. I just wanted to let people know that your website and your contact information and your social handles are all going to be listed on the event page, and as well as the end at at the end of this interview for those people that want to find out more about your books and the wonderful work that you do, and the services that you offer. And as part of today's summit, I've invited each speaker to share a special offering for those that are registered here today, if that's available. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to share that with us today, Paul, if you have anything for our listeners.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm happy to offer. So I wrote, my whole work is really not only about quantum physics, but about this mind virus, which is really at the root of the evil and the collective madness that's happening in the world. And I wrote a book about my own process where I used myself as my own case study, because I went through an unbelievable ordeal.
Yes.
A real close encounter of the Watiko kind, the mind virus, and it completely destroyed my family. It almost drove me crazy, and yet it was initiatory, and it was teaching me something, and I was lucky enough to realize that it was a revelation. And it's informed my whole work. So I wrote a huge book, a 600-page book about my personal experience in which, I discovered my work, and I'm happy to offer the ebook of that. It's called Awakened by Darkness, When Evil Becomes Your Father. And so anybody who's interested, I don't know how it would work, whether they would email you or me or whatever, but I'm happy to offer that as a gift, as a bonus.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll work it out. And then once we do, I'll post it on the last page of our interview and make it available in other places as well. But first of all, I just want to thank you for being here. I've so thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I know a lot of people will benefit from the information that you shared here today, and I could talk to you for hours on end. So I just want to say that when you were sharing this this deep trauma and upset that you went through in order to awaken, and it was an initiation. I think that's so essential in regards to reframing the suffering that many people have gone through. It's like, why am I going through all this suffering? What is the point? And some people getting really, just self-destructive in it. So I think that's so important to realize that it is an initiation to an awakening. And I guess it sucks that it's that way right now, but it just is what it is. We're recalibrating and clearing out us. I don't even know how many generations of this mind virus that you say. So
yeah, definitely.
All right, thank you so much, and I will share this video when I get it all edited with you. But in the meantime, I just want to thank you again for being here. I really value the conversation, and I'm sure I'll see you again soon.
Totally. Just want to thank you too. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Bye for now.